Hey everybody, how's it going? We got the flares going like in Star Trek, the new movies. The flares, everything is so bright. The future is so bright that it's just blinding everybody's eyes. It's just flaring up the camera, right? And if I go like right here, it's like, hey everybody, I'm in the future. Can you see me? So I'll try to keep my head right here so you can't see it. So anyway, it looks like everybody's kind of out of their rut for the time being. We'll see what happens in September. I taught for like a year online, and it looked pretty similar to this, only it was probably on the computer, and it was probably from a different perspective. But anyway, this is kind of where I lived and worked and did everything. And during the Alaskan winter, it got a little depressing. We got the cabin fever pretty good. But luckily, thanks to the internet and modern technology, we can still kind of keep together in communication, at least a little bit, right? Anyway, so somebody told me that I should probably answer some questions on my B-logs here. And because a bunch of people have been asking me these questions over the years. And so I decided to go ahead and put out a questionnaire to everybody. And I said, I need to come up with the top 10 questions here. And, well, I just asked everybody to just ask one question. And I only got like 10 responses. So I just had them all. I printed all of them out onto a piece of paper, onto a little card, and I put them all into the hat. I didn't even read them, and we'll just see how they go. We'll just go off the top of my head here. All right, here's the first one. All right, we're using the Webelos hat, right, from the Cub Scouts. All right, what is glue? Well, okay, so we're gonna. I'm not quite sure exactly what that's supposed to mean, but I assume that you mean glue as in the sense of recording industry glue, which is actually what you would put on your bus compressor. And you could put a bus compressor or any kind of like aux compressor, bus compressor. It's just basically your bus compressor that you put on the end of the bus to make sure that everything kind of fits together. And they call it glue because it does this weird effect of taking the separated tracks of, like, say your drum tracks and putting them together to make one stereo drum track. If that makes any sense at all. If it doesn't, then I'm sorry. Recording industry stuff, right? All right, moving on here. All right, how do I make my drums sound like a record? Okay, so we're getting really into the recording stuff here, which I'm really proud about. You know, I was hoping that we would get more into like the musical aspect of things, you know, being a professional musician or just playing or teaching or anything like that. But anyway, the best way to make your drums sound like a record is to record with top-notch microphones, if you can find them. Well, I mean, whatever you can get. I've made some pretty good drum sounds out of some cheap microphones, too. But I tell you what, it really does matter kind of a little bit about the microphones, and your drums need to be tuned. Drums need to be tuned, definitely. I mean, that's the bottom line. Is if you want your drums to sound really good, you need to have them tuned really well. They have to sound very good acoustically first, right? Acoustically in will sound really good. Anyway, also maybe you'll want to seek somebody. You know, there's lots and lots of YouTube videos about how to make your drums sound like a record. You probably just want to check those out. All right, moving on. We keep getting into these like recording industry questions. Should I invest in a recording interface? Yeah, that's a really good question too. I am pro recording interface. The reason I am pro interface is because when I was probably about 10 years ago, when I first started playing the trumpet into the recording interface, I kind of noticed that my sound, hi Gracie, I kind of noticed that my intonation, my attack, my sound, basically the whole enchilada sounded, not the best. Let's just say, it was okay. It wasn't like terrible, but it wasn't like, wow, recording ready, right? So, the best thing to do is to get yourself a budget microphone, right? Like, get yourself the cheapest, like, large diaphragm condenser mic. If you want to just go to Guitar Center and just say, hey, I need the cheapest interface that you can plug an XLR into. I need the cheapest XLR cable, and I need the cheapest large diaphragm condenser mic, then you would be getting yourself pretty close to having a very good recording interface that you could start doing some great stuff with. I mean, people have won Grammys on that setup before. So, yes, definitely, you want to invest in an interface. They have these microphones that have interfaces built into them as well, and those are great. Like the blue, I think it's the Blue Yeti, which is great. I mean, it has the headphone plug right into it, so you can, and I think it even comes with some software that you can use. But there's also free software you can download. Reaper, I think, is free. But I use Pro Tools. I pay for it. It's just because I like it. All right, next one. How do I make lots of money? Yeah, that's a great question. Make lots of money. You have to work really, really hard. All right. What does that mean? Well, working hard is like, I'm gonna just give you an example for the trumpet, for instance, right? It's hard to maintain the things that go on in the mouth, in your embouchure. It's really hard to maintain that. You have to be like practicing all the time, and it's not just practicing. It's not, people think practicing when you're younger, oh, it means playing all the hard parts and getting the hard parts down. Well, what happens when you play and there's no more hard parts because you've gotten to such a level that you don't really see anything hard anymore? It's just a matter of being able to blow through the whole thing. That's what it gets to. And so to be able to blow through the whole thing, you have to be like basically doing calisthenics all the time and working, like just working hard. That's what I mean. Like if you work really hard anywhere you go, if you go to work at any company, start off as the younger guy who's the lowest on the totem pole. And then you work very, very hard at that job, and you can work your way up and work really, really hard. And then if you eventually get to the very, very top, you can say, the reason I got here is because, hey, I worked really, really hard. So anyway, moving on. What is the deal? I'm going to up you with one more question on that one. What is the deal with what? What computer software should I get? Well, you definitely want to have some sort of like computer, what is that? What are they called? Like typing, I'm trying to think of what you call those things where you can type your reports and stuff. It's gonna come to me anyway. The Google Docs works great. It's free. That's what I use now. I don't use anything else. So get all the Google stuff, and I actually pay for it a little bit. So then I get like a premium service, which is great. I get a little bit of space to put my stuff up there. Um, you want to make sure you have some sort of video editing software because, chances are you're probably going to do some sort of video editing some time in your life where you'll have to like clip a couple videos together, like one or two videos together to make them one video. Again, there's free stuff for that. So if you're going to do recording, any of them are great. They're all great. All those recording softwares are great. You just have to learn them. It's just a matter of learning what you're doing and knowing what to do with your tools, right? All right. Moving on. How do you know you've been playing enough? Well, I think if you should ask that question to anybody who's played a lot and played a lot. You know what I mean? Like taking it to the level where you're like, yeah, I can't believe I'm still going, and now I'm starting to see, the repercussions and like for instance, my lip, you can see the mouthpiece in it, So have I been playing enough? Well, it depends on when you ask me the question, right? Usually I'll tell you no, because the reason I say no is because I'm usually feeling like I'm one step behind in being practiced enough, right? Like for instance, when I used to play the violin, I used to go for several hours, and I'd start feeling my the feeling of your fingers as they start to hurt, and you're like, dang, it's only been like 15 minutes and I'm starting to really hurt, my fingers are hurting, the I don't have enough callus built up, It's like, how do you build up the callus? Well, you just keep going. You just keep going and going and going and going and going until you have enough callus built up, and then maybe you might be ready to go for that concert. You know what I mean? And same thing with the lip. It's frustrating. I know it's really frustrating, but honestly, I think that the lesson is you just try to stay caught up with the stuff. I don't know if there's a staying one step ahead. Maybe there is. I don't know. I'd like to hear from somebody who knows more about that for sure. All right, let's see. Next one. How many mutes are there? Oh yeah, finally a good trumpet question. I assume. I mean, there's mutes for all instruments. I mean, there's like for the violin, there's mutes you put in. There's several different kinds of mutes. I used to think there was only one kind of mute for a violin, but it turns out there's like several. And it's like, okay, well, and they're all priced accordingly, and I think that, it's interesting because the violin mutes are like almost as expensive as the trumpet mutes, and I thought the trumpet mutes were pretty expensive. But actually, you can get some violin mutes that are very, very, very pricey. And on the trumpet, I've got a few different kinds of mutes. I've got like the straight mute, the plunger mute, which is like literally a plunger that you get at the hardware store. You take the stick off and you go wah 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 with it, which is fun, And I've had mine since I was like maybe in high school, so it's pretty old. I can say it's a few years old, couple at least. So yeah, I don't know. There's a lot, like probably hundreds of different kinds of mutes, and I keep seeing new kinds of mutes coming out. Like, oh wow, the new kind of mute, the the Wanko mute. It's like, I don't know. I'm just making things up now. They come out and you're like, well, it's just a new kind of Harmon mute, or a new kind of wah-wah mute, or a new kind of straight mute, or a new kind of cut mute. So maybe 4? I don't know. How many instruments are in a band? All right, that's a good question. So let's see. You've got the flutes. And then the flutes, you sometimes have the piccolo in there too. Sometimes you have the alto flute playing. Alto flute sounds really nice in the band, but hardly anybody can afford an alto flute, so you don't have that as often. You got the clarinets, right? Clarinets are like sometimes alto clarinet, which is like a higher clarinet that plays in the key of E flat. Then you have your B flat clarinets, which are like the ones that everybody plays. And then sometimes you'll have like a lower E flat clarinet that's like, bigger. Sometimes you'll have, and then you'll have the bass clarinet, right? Which is a fun instrument. It's like, whoa. And then sometimes you'll have the contrabass clarinet, which is like a bigger bass clarinet, right? Where are we going? Saxophones, right? Saxophones are like, you've got the alto saxophone, right? So sometimes you'll have 2 alto saxophone parts, or just one. And the alto saxophone, sometimes he plays the soprano saxophone. Soprano saxophone is a little more common, right? Little less, or it's a little less common than the alto saxophone. It seems like everybody plays the alto saxophone, but the soprano is the one that's the straight one. Sometimes they're smaller and they're curved, just like a regular saxophone. Sometimes you'll see the sopranino saxophone, but not very often in this kind of music, in a concert band kind of music. Then you have the baritone sax, which is like the bigger sax and has the little curved neck at the top. That's how you know that's the bari sax, right? All right, the French horns, right? The French horns are the ones that are the big ones that you play behind. You put your hand through the bell, you play it, and usually there's like 4 different parts for them, and they're very, very awesome instruments. They're like the bold instruments of the band. Then you have the trumpets, right? The trumpets, that's what I play, right? Trumpet. And the trumpets usually play in the key of B flat, and you have usually 3 or 4 parts, and a lot of fun, right? Then the trombones are, the ones with the slide, they're going wom, bom, 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 right? Trombones. And the trombones, sometimes you'll have the bass trombone too, which is like a bigger trombone, and it just has like a couple valves up here that you can like push with your thumb to make it go lower, and you could just play really low like a tuba. And then you have the tuba, right? The tuba down there, right? And I forgot to mention that also up in the woodwinds, you have the bassoon also playing, and the oboe, right? The oboe and the bassoon are like, they're like a double reed instrument. So it's like taking a couple of those clarinet reeds and just snapping them together and just going like that and then blowing on it. It's really, really nuts. Has like the weirdest sound, but people that play those instruments play them very lovely. All right, then you got the percussion, right? Percussion's like the snare drum, the bass drum, all of the triangles, the tambourine, what else? The cymbals, right? Crash cymbals, and then you have like this thing called the mallets, the mallet percussion stuff, and the mallet percussion stuff is like bells. They're like the glockenspiel. You know what the glockenspiel is? It's the one that has like really high pitch. And then you have the marimba. which is like a xylophone, but it has like longer tubes under it to make them resonate a little bit better. And then you have the xylophone, right? All of those kinds of instruments. Piano sometimes is in that mix, right? You might have some piano playing down there, playing something, or we've done the Rhapsody in Blue with the piano playing, and then the band playing as well. A lot of fun. Yeah. What else? Did I forget anything? I think I got it all. All right, moving on. So I don't know. I wasn't counting how many that was. How do I get playing in a town I just moved to? Yeah, this is a really good question. I think this is like the best question of the evening. I live in Alaska, and it's like it's got to the point where it's like kind of twilight when it gets dark, night, all the time. So it's kind of weird. Like, what time is it right now? It's like about 9:30 in the evening, and it's still pretty twilighty looking outside, and it just kind of stays that way. But it's getting better. So anyway, how do you get playing in a town that you just moved to, right? So you just moved to a town, and you're like, I don't know anybody here. I want to get playing. People don't know what they're missing. They know, that you're like, you're looking at all the people that are playing, and you're like, well, I know that I probably play at least as well as they do, if not better, and you're like, they are really missing out not having me playing in their band or their symphony or their rock band, their jazz band, whatever you play in, right? The choir, you want to go sing in the choir. You just have to, so you figure out who's doing it, right? So you go, and what I've done, for instance, when I was in San Diego, I'm like, I want to play some trumpet. I want to do some gigs. I want, for sure, that's my goal, is to play gigs. That's what you want to do as a musician, is to play gigs. So I'm down in San Diego, and I'm like, who's playing down here? So first thing I do is I Google San Diego Symphony, right? And I go, okay, who's the trumpet section? Do any of these guys have websites? And this is back in the day when everybody had like the cheesy website that they had like their nephew create or something like that, or like some kid that kind of knew what he was doing in 8th grade. And so anyway, I go to his website, and I find his email address, contact, or whatever. There might be like the contact blog, a bloob, or whatever you call it, Type your information in there. Get to know this person. Say, hey, do you offer lessons? And usually these people, first off, these people are gigging like nonstop. So usually they don't have a lot of time for lessons. Maybe they might give lessons during the day and then just gig at night. But a lot of those guys can't really, the chop power and stuff is a little bit harder. So if you can get lucky enough to get just gigging all the time, then you're lucky enough to do that. But because I've known a lot of guys that don't teach, but a lot of the guys do take on a couple students, like maybe like 1 or 2 a day, you know what I mean? Like, and you charge them like $80 a day, right? $80 a lesson. Sometimes these guys will have like maybe 10 students, and they're charging them like $80 a lesson. So you just suck it up and you pay the $80 a lesson. Show this guy what you have, and he goes, wow, dang, dude, you're really good. I should have given you the $80. And no, he probably won't say that. I mean, the guy in San Diego was like, he was Calvin Price. So, Calvin Price is like one of the top trumpet players in the world. So, he basically, there's nobody doing circles around him. He's like a Charlie Schuler, or who else is playing in the symphony? I don't even know who plays in the symphony these days. But, he's like Wynton Marsalis, I guess, if you're going to put it to any one of those guys, right? Really accomplished. And so to get a lesson from this guy and to play with him and to take some lessons with him was pretty cool. Unfortunately, he was so high up on the level that he probably couldn't offer me. He was like kind of like celebrity status, so he couldn't really offer me any gigs. Plus, he was like this Monet artist playing on this like $10,000 trumpet, and I'm thinking, yeah, I can only afford my $1,500 Monet trumpet. I mean, my $1,500 Bach Stradivarius trumpet, and so yeah, you take your $10,000 Monet trumpet, and I'm not sure I'm gonna ever be able to afford one, so I guess I won't be able to work with you. So then I finally found another guy in town who was actually kind of doing the gigging, really working musician type gigs. You know, he taught some band and he taught some lessons, and then he also did as many gigs as he possibly could. And so it was kind of good to meet him. He showed me a lot of techniques. He said, get yourself a schedule book, which I'm still kind of working on taking that one to heart. I've been using my cell phone all this time, which may or may not be a good thing. I'm still trying to decide if the cell phone is a good way to do the scheduling or not, because I've had a lot of issues with the cell phone, and then the learning curve, and then I'm like, it takes too long to figure out what to do, and then next thing you know, you're like, well, I could have just written it into a stupid book, and what the heck, you know what I mean? So anyway, I don't know what to say. Get yourself some kind of scheduling method, book of some sort, and I think you'll be good. And meet the person who's doing the gigs. And then what you could do is, like, you know, you don't want to be like getting in these guys going like, oh yeah, well, I'm better than you and I should be doing gigs before you're doing, because, you know, sometimes it's hard to get gigs. It's really hard to find, like, especially paying gigs, you know, like it's pretty easy to find, like, going to play in like the community band. And so even in the community band, sometimes like these guys will play in the community band also just to get some extra practicing in, and then they have demands and stuff, and they're like, oh yeah, well, I only play first chair, and I insist that I blow all the solos, and if anybody there is as good as me, they're gonna play fourth trumpet. All right, that's what I, you know, and then it's like, what the heck? There's no opportunities, right? So you gotta have to like work on how you talk to some of these people, you know, like they feel like they've worked really hard to get there, and even if they have or not, you know, you may have worked just as hard or harder to get where you're at playing the lower part, right? So you know, it's just it's hard to know how to talk to people. I think the answer is, though, to just humble yourself and just go, the better man would play the lower part. You know, the lower man would just tear it up and be okay with it. And I've met a lot of people who have been like that, and honestly, they're extremely awesome, you know. So I think that's the best thing to do. Community bands are great too, because I mean, if you're good, and there's community bands, usually they're at a level of, like, you know, high school. So it's like, if you're a good player, then they're like, oh yeah, come on in, blow all the solos. Yeah, you're great. You're great. Play the first chair, you know? And then when you're doing that kind of stuff, they get to know you, and the instrument repair guy is probably playing in that band too. And you kick it off with those people. You know, all of the music teachers are playing in that band. And then you kind of create a great friendship, and I think that's really the way to get to know people. The professional music scene's a tough one, you know, getting into the union and stuff. I don't really know much about that, honestly. You'd probably have to reach out to somebody else. But if you're just wanting to play, you know, I've done a lot of playing, and I've done a lot of professional playing too. Like, I mean, I've played in like some of the top gigs in the town, but it's like, you know, are these really that big? They're not in Los Angeles, you know, it's just, you know, here in Juneau, Alaska, you know, so it's like, well, Juneau, Alaska is the capital of Alaska, but, well, it's still Alaska, you know, and it's like a small little community, you know, so it's like, well, hey, he's the big fish of Juneau, Alaska, you know, where there aren't really any professional gigs, but there's a lot of community gigs, right? So, hey, I can play a lot of community gigs, right? And then I have to, you know, of course, find money other places, you know, as a musician to make ends meet to live here, right? So that's all the trade-off that you do as a musician. Anyway, we're like over a half an hour now, and if you're still even listening to me right now, then I commend you. Keep your questions coming in, because I'd like to start doing more of this as this post-COVID thing starts. And you see, when I was teaching my class, I had to go for 45 minutes nonstop, and it's just like, this has just become the normal for me, is to just talk and talk and talk and fill the time, and answer all the questions that anybody has. So yeah, keep the questions coming. I really appreciate them. Just post them in the comments if you like, and please subscribe. I lost track of which number of B-log this is. I'm kind of disappointed that the Taco Bell burrito rant, the XXL burrito, grilled stuffed burrito at Taco Bell has been discontinued. It's kind of really sad. Really sad. I'm like, my heart is broken, but there's no Taco Bell here anyway, so it doesn't really matter to me anyway. Anyway, we'll see you guys all later. Keep the questions coming. This is the B-log. Talk to you later.